Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Sam Unger Real Estate Team, powered by eXp Realty, proudly serving Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties. Call 407-790-9957 or visit samsellsorlando.net. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you here on this cool mid-December evening. Eric, are you feeling peachy?
Yeah. Oh, hold on a second here. I'm sorry. I was checking out some kind of what the houses were costing in Omaha, Nebraska. Lincoln, Nebraska. Oh, my bad. No, not bad. No. We're good. We're good. I swear. I'm not focused at all in Nebraska. Not at all.
You know, if you move to Nebraska, you're going to get hit harder with state taxes than you would here in Orlando. I'm just telling you.
Listen, if I get paid twice as much to move there, I could deal with it. All right, let's just go with it.
All right. Well, hey, that's capitalism, right? So we are diving in. This is our we're recording this Thursday night, December 14th. Sorry for doing this a day later than we usually do because I was under the weather. You can probably still hear it. I'm still a little sick.
No. The truth. Here's the truth. The truth was unannounced. Jeff moved all my stuff away from my office without me knowing, and so we had to get all my stuff back, and so we had to push it back a day.
And so you're jet setting back and forth between your old office and your new office. We are. You can follow us as always on blackandgoldbanneret.com, and we are brought to you by the Sam Unger Real Estate Team. Thanks again to Sam and his team for their support of the podcast. You can hit us up at blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest leading up to the 2018 Chick-Fil-A Peach Bowl in Atlanta. As well, we'll be covering that. That's what we're covering today. Is we're going to be previewing the Peach Bowl. We're going to be checking in on some other sports as well. We've got you can hit us up at facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Our Facebook page has been getting a little bit more traffic. Make sure you give us a like. Follow us there, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon, and follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo. Subscribe to this podcast if you don't already on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Let's dive right in. So, all the coaching stuff that went on last week, we had two emergency podcasts. And one for obviously the American Athletic Conference Championship, Knights finishing 12-0, and Scott Frost leaving. The other one for the hiring of Josh Heupel. And here we are in the midst of a coaching transition, and we are going to play a football game. New Year's Day. We have not previewed this game yet, and this will be our preview show. We'll probably preview the game one more time before the game, but we're playing Auburn. In the Chick-Fil-A Peach Bowl. New Year's Day, 12:30 kick, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, no longer at the Georgia Dome because they blew that up. If you didn't see it, it's because the MARTA bus got in the way. Did you see that, by the way?
I did. That's talk about timing, huh? What a fitting way to go.
Yeah. I remember watching the first game in the Georgia Dome, the first NFL football game in the Georgia Dome. It was week 1 of the 92 NFL season, and it was the Jets at the Falcons, and it was and the Jets were all thrilled because their new starting quarterback taking over for the veteran Ken O'Brien, who decided to move on from the Jets that year, was their quarterback of the future was Browning Nagel.
That's right,
and that did not go well. But Now they open up this new stadium here, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, right next door. Lots of UCF stuff going on. Lots of news coming off of this. A couple things I wanted to get out first. UCF has sold out its ticket allotment. 12,500 tickets sold out. So how about that effort by the UCF fans? And look at what happens when you send UCF to a bowl game that's relatively nearby, right?
So I guess people are not upset now about the rankings anymore. They're good. We're good. I mean,
oh no, of course we are. Of course we are.
Oh, okay.
And we're all going to be there to tell everybody about it.
Okay. Yeah. Look, obviously Atlanta makes a lot of sense. It's drivable for a lot of people. It's travelable, and I think there were a lot of people, honestly, that missed the Fiesta Bowl that are going to, take this opportunity and go to the game in Atlanta. So it makes a lot. I'm not surprised. Certainly, I think the location you mentioned and the fact you're playing an SEC school all kind of really point to, plus the momentum from the season. I mean, obviously going undefeated with the last two games being so dramatic. It doesn't surprise me at all. And bowl games, usually you get bandwagon people to jump in at the same time. I guarantee you there are people that bought tickets to this bowl game that haven't been to a game in a couple of years. So it's a combination of a lot of things. But, I mean, if you're the Peach Bowl, right? I mean, they're happy. They're thrilled. I mean, it's a good start, but not a surprise.
Right. Well, they're playing against an Auburn team that comes in 10-3. They lost the SEC championship game to a Georgia team that they had clobbered earlier in the year. And so Auburn gets left out of the college football playoff. There was a belief that they would be in the college football playoff had they beaten Georgia, but they lose 28-7. So they're coming off a loss in that very stadium, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Their three losses on the year, by the way. Obviously, that second Georgia game, they lost on September the 9th to then number 3 Clemson, who did make the playoff, 14-6, and then they lost to LSU, then unranked, 27-23. Auburn's been in the top 25 all year, fell down to 21, fought their way up to 4, and are now 7th. UCF comes into the game ranked, was it 12th, I think, in the college football?
Sure.
Yeah, so basically hovering around 10. But, hey, it's Gus Malzahn. It's Auburn. This is a good football team. I don't think anybody should be sleeping on them from the UCF side of things. Let's take a look at this matchup here, Eric Lopez. What was your first impression when you heard that UCF would be playing Auburn as opposed to some of the other squads that had been bandied about? I think Wisconsin was thrown around a little bit and all that. What was your impression? What was your initial impression when you saw UCF would be playing Auburn?
Not a surprise. I felt, especially because I felt Alabama was going to get into the playoff, because you can't have a college football playoff without Alabama, apparently. So God forbid. Right. So going under that assumption, I had a feeling that the UCF was probably going to play the loser of the Georgia Auburn game in the SEC championship game. And what's very interesting about Auburn is they're 2-1 against the teams that are in the playoff. They beat Alabama. They split with Georgia, lost to Clemson, as you mentioned, and yet they're sitting home. And what's interesting is what would have happened had they not blown the big lead against LSU. Right. Would they still be in the playoff if they not blown that game? We'll never know. But, it's a team that's talented. It's obviously, ironically, is going to be playing their third undefeated team in the last, month? They played Georgia when they were undefeated in early November. They played Alabama at the Iron Bowl when Alabama was undefeated. That was on the final week of the regular season prior to the conference championship games. And now they're playing UCF, who's undefeated. So it's kind of interesting with that scenario with Auburn to get in there. I think the big question, obviously, Auburn's very talented defensively. Offensively, they got a good running game. Ironically, UCF's going to be facing a quarterback who played prior to Auburn at Baylor, who you see, and Jarrett Stidham, who obviously played at Baylor and was actually one of the guys that followed Bryce Petty, who, of course, was the starting quarterback for Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl against UCF, if you're looking for some correlations and some connections there. I think the big question, and we'll get into the UCF side of things as far as the, quote, distractions or whatever you want to call it, but I think for Auburn, the interesting thing is, well, are they happy to be here? Are they going to be happy to be playing in the Peach Bowl? Are they going to be playing in Mercedes-Benz for the second time in a row after they lost to Georgia? And I think, as you'll talk to our guest coming up, is Auburn going to be interested in this game? Are they going to be motivated to play this game? I think those are going to be some interesting questions. And one of the people that out loud believes that Auburn won't be very motivated is one Paul Feinbaum. Paul Feinbaum, who hosts a daily radio show, as well as his radio show now is on TV on ESPN2 from 2 to 3, and he's on SEC Network every day. I think it's like 3 to 6. Mm-hmm. Him and Laura Rutledge, former Florida Gator, also covers for ESPN, on Thursday's edition talked about this game, Jeff. I want to know what your reaction is. Here's Paul Feinbaum and Laura Rutledge about Auburn and UCF and whether Auburn will be motivated for this game.
I mean, Ohio State has bitter disappointment, but the difference between Ohio State and Auburn, Ohio State won a championship. I mean, they're coming off of a high. Auburn's coming off of, we just got through beating this team 3 weeks ago. Now we got beaten, and we're sitting there watching our biggest rival get in the college football playoff, and our second biggest rival just beat us. And we get to go to Atlanta.
Right, and they beat their biggest rival and put them in a situation where, they were not, they were waiting on other things to happen. The one thing, too, though, is that it was a tough task for Auburn. I mean, let's not forget that. The fact that they did beat number one teams back to back, and then you had to beat another one, beat Georgia again. You knew that Georgia was going to be able to game plan you and they were going to be ready for that one. But and Georgia's certainly a very talented team. But as well as Auburn was playing, it was perplexing that they lost. Yeah. In my opinion, it was perplexing the way they lost.
And what really hurts is that in that state, as you know, Laura, because you've spent so much time there, I mean, winning the Iron Bowl is supposed to carry such great bragging rights. Yeah. But I mean, what Auburn fan is going to brag to an Alabama fan at the Christmas table?
UCF.
When they're going, Alabama's going to the playoffs, and Auburn's getting in the truck and driving 2 hours over to Atlanta to play a team that they're not excited to see.
Okay, you mentioned that, and here's the thing: UCF deserves a ton of credit. They are a very good football team.
But Auburn just got through playing Georgia and Alabama.
Right, and I just wonder if that works in UCF's favor a little more. I'm not saying Auburn's going to disrespect them. I really don't think they will. I think the Auburn players will not disrespect UCF. Maybe some of their fans will. I don't think they will.
I just don't think there's any motivation. I mean, you have beaten, as everyone knows, the number one team twice. You played for the SEC championship. You miss out on the playoffs while the team you beat gets in the playoffs. And you get to go play UCF, and you really, it's not like they're, you've covered UCF games, you know them, but these Auburn players, they know the SEC. Their biggest non-conference game this year was at Clemson. I mean, they played Georgia, Alabama, and now they're going, and it's one thing if they were playing this game in Hawaii, but they're playing it in Atlanta.
There you go. That was from the Paul Feinbaum show. But there you go, Jeff. Paul Feinbaum does not believe Auburn will be motivated at all interested in this game.
That's just Paul needling the Auburn fans. Come on, man.
What do you agree or disagree? I mean, I think there's some valid. The interesting thing about this game, and this has always been the question, is if you played Alabama, you were one win away from playing for the playoffs. Now you're playing UCF. Are they going to get geared up for this game? Are they going to be fired up? Is the fan base interested in this game? You're not. You're playing.
I think that it's
question.
This is what I think. All right. I think that, yes, Auburn's disappointed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this with our guest today, Justin Ferguson from SEC Country. And he has some great insight on this. Yes, Auburn is frustrated, but I do think that, I'm a big believer, by the way, as someone who follows the SEC because I covered Georgia for 2 years. I am a believer in Gus Malzahn in terms of getting his players motivated. I think the problem that Auburn is going to run into in this game, I want to see what you think about this, is that if you ask, who's got the pressure, all the pressure is on Auburn. Because, if you lose this game, then you validated everyone saying, well, you shouldn't have been in the playoff. It's a good thing Alabama got in because you didn't deserve to be in there. And then you're also losing. You're carrying that Power 5 conference flag with you, And if you lose to, UCF, geez, it was so much for your SEC. It's like you get your SEC card taken away. Which I do think I don't think there's any pressure on UCF in this game at all, even though they're undefeated.
I disagree. Are you crazy?
No. I'll tell you why. If UCF wins, great, undefeated season, right? But if they lose, they're 9.5-point dogs. They're supposed to lose to an SEC team, especially when you're playing in Atlanta. Literally, no. I don't think anyone outside of UCF thinks the Knights can win this game at all.
I disagree, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think a lot of people agree with Paul Feinbaum, and I'm actually one of them. I don't think Auburn's interested in this game.
Okay, but then why did the line jump from 8 to 9.5?
Well, I thought it 10. So I didn't.
Why did it jump from 8 to 10?
Well, now it's 9.5. No, I'm saying I saw it at 10 and it's dropped to 9.5 because they're a big program. I mean, you're always going to favor big brand names. Why is Alabama favored over Clemson? Because it's Alabama. I mean, that just happens. It's always
Saban.
Yeah. So and it's Auburn. People are going to always SEC teams more times than not. If you look at all the bowl games, more times than not, they're going to be a favorite. Very seldom will they be a big underdog or an underdog in general. I mean, it would have to be unique circumstances. Like I think Georgia's maybe a 1-point dog to Oklahoma. That's about it, one I can think of. But I disagree. I think with Auburn, yes, if they lose, you lost to. How can you lose to that UCF team? But I think the majority of the media, national media, is going to say, well, they just weren't motivated. They weren't interested. They didn't show up. Like Paul Feinbaum alluded to in the video. We saw that with Florida State against Houston. A lot of people, Florida State no-showed that game. Oh, you didn't.
Well, because if they won the game, well, congratulations, you did what you were supposed to do. If you lose the game, it's a catastrophe. Right. You stink. You shouldn't have lost to a non-power school, supposedly.
The funny thing is I think both teams already have their excuses made. I think both, or at least fan bases anyway. If Auburn loses, the fan base will say, well, who cares? It doesn't matter. It's just a Peach Bowl. We didn't care. We're not in the playoff. That's all that matters. If UCF loses, fans will say, well, it's because of the coaching distractions and Scott Frost was distracted in this. So everybody's got their excuses already lined up for this game, one way or the other, regardless of what happens. But I disagree with you from the UCF standpoint about no pressure. I disagree. I think they put pressure on themselves because – number one, you got a chance to do something you've never done before in your school's history, which is go undefeated. And I think that's important. Number two, let's be honest, a lot of people talking smack about how this team should be a top 10 team. This team should be good. Well, if you don't show up against Auburn, now you're going to hear about everybody saying, oh, you see, now you know why you weren't ranked so high in the playoffs. So I disagree. I think there is pressure from that standpoint of validating how good you are. Fair or not, I don't agree with it personally. I personally think bowl games are overrated and overblown, and I think we make too much of it. I'll give you an example. 1 year ago today, as a matter of fact, remember a year ago this time, Jeff, how everybody was telling us how this was an important bowl game for UCF and Scott Frost against Arkansas State. It's building momentum for next year, right? That's the old cliche about bowl games. They may lose to Arkansas State, and everybody this is a catastrophe. It's, oh, my God. Well, you know how it hurt.
By the way, a pretty good Arkansas State team, let's be fair. Right.
Fine. But and everybody's like, oh, my God, how could they lose to that? And what happened? Did it hurt the program's momentum? No. They had a great year. It has no impact on the following year either way. So from that standpoint. So I do think we overblow this stuff, but I do think there will be people – if UCF loses this game, that will say, this team wasn't all that great. You see, that's why you weren't ranked, and that's why the committee, didn't rank you as high, and they kind of justified it. And B, I think the fan base will say, you see, the Scott Frost and this coaching staff, they were distracted with Nebraska recruits and things like that. They shouldn't have been coaching, which is nonsense. So either way, we're just prepared for a lot of nonsense in their post-game write-up.
Excuses, which is a great segue. Let's talk about coaching. Scott Frost will coach UCF in this game. They are getting the band back together for one last ride.
Yeah.
Frost will be on the sideline. He was named the National Coach of the Year. What did you think of him wearing the two pins, by the way, on his suit? He was wearing a Nebraska pin. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it was a nice touch.
Award show, Nebraska pin on one lapel and a UCF pin on the other. I don't know how I feel about this just yet. I do feel.
What?
I do feel. Here's what I feel.
Oh boy.
I don't fault Scott Frost for doing this one bit. I mean, this is a really historic season that he's a part of. He wants to roll one last time with his guys. And I applaud him and Danny White and Bill Moose for, putting their heads together and saying, hey, look, guys, we're all adults here. This is what I want to do. Let's figure out a way to do this. We can do this, right? We're all grown-ups. And they did. What I don't know how I feel about is there's still just this awkwardness about it, and I do give Scott Frost credit for saying that this is how I want to go out here, okay, and I'm going to ride with my guys one way or the other. It's still though, maybe I'm just a little old fashioned. It's still just a little weird, isn't it? I mean, he's jet setting back and forth between recruiting for Nebraska on the weekends and coaching UCF up on the weekdays. And meanwhile, UCF has already hired his successor. Meanwhile, he's taken all of his assistants from UCF, including Sean Beckton and Travis Fisher. Okay. And Troy Walters is heading to Nebraska as well when this is over, even though Troy's officially named the interim head coach when Frost left. I think it's kind of like one of those things where when you see someone do something that actually has integrity to it, this is so cynical, but when you see somebody who actually does something that has some level of integrity to it, you're almost like, oh, come on, really? We're going to do this? I'm like, yeah, this is how I want to do it. Like, okay, all right, no problem. How do you feel about this? I mean, I get the feeling that it's not as awkward for you.
No, it's what I expected. I'm surprised that people are surprised by this. The only reason why this is even awkward is because of the stupid early signing period that they have introduced this year. That's the only reason. That's really the only reason. That's the only reason why people are awkward, because, he's flipping commits, which we'll get into, which I think is silly as well, because guys flip all the time. And I got news for people. Not every player commits to the school. They commit to the coach. And so to act surprised that guys are flipping from UCF to Nebraska because they want to play for Scott Frost should not be a surprise. Just like it won't be a surprise when Josh Heupel probably gets some guys from Missouri to flip from Missouri to UCF, all right?
I think he's already working on that too, by the way. But anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. But that's okay, right? But the fan base gets upset at Scott Frost because kids are, flipping him in Nebraska, but they don't have a problem if the other coaches are flipping other guys. It's funny how fans just like it how they like it. Here's my question, because you have brought it up, and I feel like I think Andrew and Trace, I listen to them on Nightcast. A lot of people have said this. My question is, number one, who did you think was going to coach this bowl game all this time if it wasn't Scott Frost?
I thought it was going to be Troy Walters. I really did.
Why? He's not the head coach.
Yeah, he was the interim head coach, though. I thought that it would have been, look, Frost is gone to Nebraska. The rest of us, we're going to finish this off at UCF, but Troy's going to be in charge.
Well, guess what? Troy's at Nebraska, too. So what's the difference?
I know.
They all gone. So they all took jobs at Nebraska. Now, if Troy Walters would have been, say, announced as the head coach, then I think you might have a valid argument at that point. But he didn't. He didn't get the job, and he took the job at Nebraska. So I don't know. And he's not going to wait till after the bowl game to get a job, all right? You guys got to get a job when he's got to get a job. I mean, so especially with the way again, it goes back to the early signing period. I think the one thing that needs to be done, that has to – I don't know why they brought it in the first place, but it needs to go, because that's really why this is creating all this chaos. Because
I think they screwed it up. First of all, I did we've talked about this before. I do think that there should have been an early signing period. O'Leary used to talk about this, where there should be an early signing period because that way you don't have to babysit these kids until February. But I think they screwed up in that the early signing period starts too late. I think it should be in September, when you're playing the non-conference games and before you get to conference play.
It definitely shouldn't be going on while there's coaching movement, because there's always going to be coaching movement in December, and that's why we've seen so much activity done so quickly and maybe behind the scenes, because everybody's freaking out about getting these early signing period guys, and that's why people are flipping out. If there was no signing period in December, All right. If there was no signing period in December right now, it would all be like it was before, which was February. We wouldn't even be hearing about all these guys flipping to Nebraska or whatever, or Scott Frost recruiting, right now. It would probably be hearing about it a month from now, maybe a few weeks from now. Maybe you get one or two kids, but that's why everybody's kind of like all awkward about it, because yes, it is interesting that he's coaching UCF. He's got the UCF shirt on, and then he's like, there was this one day in the week where he literally went to practice. He did the Peach Bowl press conference here in Orlando, and then he took a plane to California to recruit a quarterback to come to Nebraska, and then he stopped off in Nebraska. I mean, it's pretty amazing what he's doing. Honestly, he doesn't really, from his standpoint, he doesn't gain anything from coaching this bowl game. So I commend him for even wanting to coach the bowl game. I think he's generally doing it for the players. I think the players, most of them definitely want him to coach. And quite frankly, he gives them the best chance to win the game. Troy Walters wasn't going to give him the best chance to win as a head coach. Who else? Josh Heupel can't coach this game because he doesn't know the system. Heck, he doesn't know the players well enough yet. That's not fair to him.
A new system in 12 practice days or whatever.
So what are you going to do? Call up George O'Leary and give him a chance to call that? I mean, he doesn't even know the system, and that's the thing.
Call up George and have him pull a Barry Alvarez, because doesn't Barry Alvarez coach Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl like once every 5 years because they're changing coaches?
Right. Barry Alvarez stepped in one year when they were in the Rose Bowl. I think
Twice.
It was because. Was it twice?
Twice he's done that.
Okay, I've lost track. But see, here's the problem. The problem is you can't even do that if you even wanted to, because they run completely different systems. See, Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin, they run the same system. He can run that. George O'Leary has no clue about how to run a spread. It just doesn't work. So I always felt Scott Frost was going to coach this game. I never doubted it. This is not the first time that this has happened before. I point back to the 05 Fiesta Bowl, where both Urban Meyer and Walt Harris. Urban Meyer was the head coach at Utah, and Walt Harris was the coach at Pittsburgh. Both had taken jobs elsewhere. Urban Meyer went to Florida. Harris went to Stanford, had gotten the job at Stanford. They both coached their respective schools in that Fiesta Bowl, Utah and Pittsburgh. So it's been done before. It could happen. I don't have a problem with it. Scott Frost is a big part of the reason why UCF's 12-0. And I don't see anything wrong. I don't see anything done wrong by either side. Is it, I think there were some things certainly that's maybe awkward, like you said, I guess. But I've never 1 second had any doubts that Scott Frost was going to coach this game, because quite frankly, who was going to coach this game? There are no other options here. And I think, look, if UCF was playing, in no disrespect, but if UCF was playing, let's say in the Boca Raton Bowl, he would not be coaching this game.
Yeah,
but
you're
it's
probably right.
The Peach, right? But it's the Peach Bowl. It's a big bowl game. And I think everybody benefits from this. UCF this is their best chance to win, is by having the staff work this game like they're going to do. And I don't see any negative. And for people, I've seen people saying, well, this is just an infomercial for Nebraska. No. It's an infomercial for everybody. It's an infomercial for Nebraska, for UCF, for everybody. It's not like Nebraska is a rival to UCF or anything like that. I think it's a win-win for all parties. Actually, I think Scott Frost has the most to lose here, because, he's got to try and beat Auburn. And if he loses to Auburn, people are going to blame him, I think, unfairly, because they're going to say he was distracted or he didn't, lock in on the game, which I think is unfair, because I think what he's doing is really a noble thing, and he's doing it for the players. I don't think Scott Frost will – if UCF loses this game, it's not because Scott Frost is busy recruiting Nebraska or distracted or not caring. He cares. And if anything, he'll have more than plenty of time to prepare for Auburn.
By the way, Alvarez has come back to Wisconsin to coach in the bowl game twice. He retired officially from Wisconsin after 2005. But he coached once in the Rose Bowl in 2012, a loss, and once in the Outback Bowl 2 years later in 2014, a win. So
wow. So what are you calling for him to come to coach UCF? Is that what you're saying? Is that you going for the trifecta there?
No. I wasn't sure if George would pull an Alvarez and come down from the ivory tower. But
no, it's funny you mentioned that. That's the problem.
Of course he wouldn't. But I'm just joking. No. But anyway.
But I do wonder though, if UCF was running a pro set offense, that could have been an option. It's crazy. You just brought up what Wisconsin has done. I think that's a big part of the issue here is not everybody can run that spread offense, especially the way Scott Frost does. Whereas if UCF was running a pro set offense, maybe you could have gotten.
And George is allergic to spread offenses. I think we both know that.
By the way, I don't agree with people. Some saying, well, why didn't Josh Heupel just coach this game with his staff? He has nothing to gain from this. If anything, he'd be coaching a bunch of players he doesn't know. This is a system that neither side would be familiar with each other. If he loses the game, people will be freaking out, like, "Oh my God, we hired this guy."
Right.
Let's hear from Josh Heupel, because he was on Paul Feinbaum's show, and Feinbaum asked him about this kind of awkward situation, as you called it, and here's what Josh Heupel had to say about the bowl game.
Yeah, it certainly is unique, to say the least. But I think, the bowl game is really about the 2017 season. I think our kids are extremely excited about the opportunity to go play Auburn in the Peach Bowl. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Frost and what he's been able to do. I've known him for a long time. And, so I'm excited to get an opportunity to watch them practice, watch them go through the process, learn a lot about the players that we have currently on the roster. I won't be in game planning or anything like that. The previous staff will handle all of that, and at the end of the day, give our kids the best chance to go out there and be successful.
There you go. So Josh Heupel, saying, by the way, like Scott Frost, understands this is about the 2017 team. He's going to be there watching the game. He has no problem with it. So he has no problem with it. I don't have a problem with it. Scott Frost, I don't think anybody should have a problem with anything.
One other thing I wanted to mention about recruits real quick, and you touched upon, he's flipping recruits. And I put this out in a tweet earlier this week. I said, listen, I never worry about UCF's recruiting, especially if, if Scott Frost is trying to flip recruits. Listen, the kids who are going to want to be here are going to be here. And the kids who aren't won't, right? The coaches know this. The kids who are already here know this. It's not a secret. It's also not a secret that very few coaches actually finish their full tenure and see their first recruiting class all the way through. Very, very few. I think 1/3, somewhere around 1/3. I went back and looked at it. 1/3 of FBS coaches have actually been at their current schools long enough to see their first recruiting class through, all the way through, 5 years. So if like you said, Eric, if these players are following coaches around, they're setting themselves up for disappointment. I don't think players are that stupid. I think some
do, though. No, I disagree. I think some guys do go because of the coach, and now once they go there,
I think they go because of the system. I don't think they go so much because of the coach. See, there's a difference between the two. Like if you run the same system, like let's say if we did hire Troy Walters, then it would pretty much be a shoo-in that we'd be running the same system. We're still going to be running an up-tempo system with Josh Heupel. It's just going to be different than what we were running under Scott Frost. And if you from speaking of this from a UCF perspective, right? If you're a recruit and you're, quote, committed, I love that word, committed to UCF, which, you're not really committed. No. If you're committed to UCF and then you flip over to Nebraska because Scott Frost went to Nebraska, well, then you deserve what you get. Go away. We don't want you here. We want guys who want to be here no matter who the coach is, because those are the guys who you build programs around, that love the place, that love UCF, not so much love this one guy who, you never know. Scott Frost, goes 500 3 years in a row. Nebraska fans will be calling for his head. So I this is why I don't worry about recruiting.
Well, no, I agree with that. I mean, I'm just saying, but I'm just saying there are percentages of guys that go for the coach, especially in basketball. I think is a higher percentage. Basketball guys go to play for Coach Calipari or Coach Krzyzewski.
But that's also because there's a percentage of guys who go to play for those coaches because they believe that they'll get them to the NBA. I think that's no doubt about that's the difference. I don't think that the pro prospect of it plays quite. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying it doesn't play quite as much into it for a football player.
I disagree with that. I mean, why do you think guys go to Alabama? It ain't because of hanging out in Tuscaloosa, Alabama all year round. It's because they want to play for Nick Saban, an iconic coach, and hey, he can help me get to the NFL. Same thing with Urban Meyer. Right. Or if guys go to Ohio State, because they want to play for Urban Meyer and they want to go get to the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons guys go. And look, I think some guys do go because they like the coach. Generally, they get a relationship. When coaches recruit players, there's a relationship that gets built there. You get comfortable with a coach and you like that guy. You're like, man, I want to play for that guy. So I'm sure there's certain guys that were going to come to UCF because they wanted to play for Scott Frost, and now Scott's in Nebraska, and you're like, you know what? I want to play for Scott Frost because he's fun, he's cool, and I feel like he has my back and things like that. But you're right. You know what?
Go ahead. Go. Bring your coat.
But I don't think the kid's wrong for doing that. Why is the kid bad for that? I don't think the kid's wrong for that.
Because the evidence suggests that that's a foolish move.
How do you know? Maybe the kid if the kid goes to Nebraska and he has a good time, I mean, it worked out.
Right. I just think if you're a high school kid, I mean, look around you. 1/3 of the coaches in FBS don't see their first recruiting class through. So if you're going to go to school X because of the coach that's there, chances are he's not going to be there by the time you graduate. So
yeah, but kids don't think of it that way. They're thinking, hey, I'll be there for 3 years. He'll be there for my 3 years. They don't think that way. And look, a kid can go to the school because they like the school, and then they go to the school and they end up being disappointed. So it goes both ways.
That's true too.
It's not like, oh, well, I'm going for the campus, and then they go to the campus and they realize, wow, this wasn't really all what I thought it would be. So I just think there's a lot of variables. I mean, why do you know?
But I don't think that's the case with UCF, though.
As far as what?
I mean, you come to UCF. I mean, how many kids do you think would come to UCF and be like, man, this place is kind of a disappointment compared to what I was seeing?
Well, but UCF's had players transfer. I mean, it's not like
that's true.
Bo Schneider transferred.
There's a number of different reasons for that. Well, Bo Schneider transferring is because the system wasn't for him.
Right.
Right.
I mean, because coaches change. Things change. Things happen.
Yeah. And also, there are too many quarterbacks.
Well, look, and the kid could go to UCF. You know, maybe they're going to stay and go to UCF, but now this coaching staff, maybe they don't get the playing time that they feel like they should, and they feel it's because of the new coaching staff. And guess what? So now they change their mind. You know, things happen for a lot of different reasons. There's not one specific reason, but I think to your point, UCF's going to be fine. At the end of the day, they're going to have guys. They're going to come to UCF. Yes, you're going to lose some guys to go. You know, by the way, you probably were going to lose some of these guys that are now flipping. We're probably going to flip anyway. There's always a certain group of kids that are always going to flip at the end anyway, just because they do, you know. So to suggest that this guy Scott Frost being around is hurting us, I don't buy that, because Josh Heupel's going to get his kids, and some kids are going to stay, and some things are going to go. It always seems to even out. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many kids you bring in; it's how you coach them up.
Right.
All right. If you don't coach them up, exactly. So. That's the name of the game. So I think everybody will be fine in this deal. And I just think it's been honestly an overblown. Once again, this is what we do as media, because we have nothing else to talk about. We got to talk about all this drama and this nonsense that has nothing to do with what happens on the field. Just like all those distractions these players supposedly had the last 3 weeks of the year, right? I mean, what happened to that? Remember that? Oh, this team is too distracted. There's so many things going on. It's going to affect them in the game. Yeah, no, they won. It's nonsense.
Right. Yeah. Distraction. God, my favorite word. Oh, man.
I wish I had those distractions, man.
Well, stick around, because we're going to distract you with a break here in a second. And when we come back, we will take a look at the Auburn side of things. We've got Justin Ferguson from SEC Country joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast to give us a little bit of perspective on the Auburn side of things. So stick around. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is back after this. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Sam Unger Real Estate Team. Sam and his team proudly serve Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties, specializing in buying, selling, and new construction. Powered by eXp Realty. Sam is a proud UCF graduate, class of 2006, and fans, he's such a dedicated Knight fan that right now, if you work with him as your realtor, he will donate a portion of his commission to the UCF Football Excellence Fund in your name. The real estate market here in Central Florida has been on the move for some time now, so if you're ready to buy a new home or sell your current home, Sam's got you covered so you can find the right home at the right price in the right location. So give Sam a call right now at 407-790-9957. Again, that's 407-790-9957. Or visit him on the web at samsellsorlando.net. Again, that's samsellsorlando.net. You can also reach Sam on Facebook at facebook.com/samsellsorlando. Get in touch with the Sam Unger Real Estate Team today and make finding your dream home a reality.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. blackandgoldbanneret.com is where you can catch all of our latest content. Oh, by the way, Eric Lopez, we're going to have a crew going up to cover the Peach Bowl. Brian Murphy, spokes_Murphy on Twitter, is going to be covering the game from the press box live. Derek Warden will be our staff photographer. Will be on the field at the Peach Bowl.
He's done a phenomenal job all year, by the way.
Yes, he has. I tell you something. If you have not seen Derek's photo galleries from the games earlier this year, you are missing out, my man, because he's just been he's been a real asset to us this year. I mean, there's really no two ways about it. So thanks to Derek, thanks to Brian. They'll be up there. I will actually be up there too, Eric Lopez, but I will be up there in a fan capacity.
Yeah,
I know. Well, here's the reason why. It was one of those things, like when we graduated, right? I always tell myself, one day UCF is going to get to a big bowl game, and I'm going to go, right? And then it happened in 2014, and it was a very difficult time when it happened, and so I couldn't go. And I regretted that, right? And I told myself then, I said, if UCF ever gets back to a big bowl game, I'm going to find a way to go. Wow. And here they are in Atlanta, and so it's going to be a trip for myself and my son Connor. We're going up there. We're going to drive the 6 hours. We got our hotel all set. We're actually going to go to the UCF Alumni Association official tailgate, which is being held at the College Football Hall of Fame, which I'm really looking forward to for that. And then we're going to go to the game, and we're going to enjoy it, and maybe check out the stadium, see some friends, and hopefully have a good time. We were at we've been to a couple football games together as fans, but this will be a big experience. I'm really excited to take my son to this game. So this should be a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So we'll have Brian obviously will be in the press box covering the game. You got Derek taking photos. You're going to be in there. You'll give the fan perspective.
Yeah, I'll be there giving some fan perspective. I got my mobile device with me, and
nice. And so really,
if I just keep Connor fed, I think we'll be fine.
Correct. So that's keep it on Black and Gold Banneret, where you got literally every angle covered. That'll be fun. I think kind of a cool experience for you to, I think, give a perspective from the fan standpoint leading up, from the pregame on to certainly into the game and kind of the reaction from the stands. Murph obviously will have everything covered during the game, and it's going to be fun. So it's going to be a very interesting deal.
All right. So in line with that, time for our guest. I wanted to get some perspective on the Auburn side of things because, they come in 10-3, a little disappointed, obviously, that that they didn't make it to the college football playoff. And, what is the talk of the town up, or as they say, down on the plain, down in Auburn about this team and what this game means to them at 10-3, and so we called up Justin Ferguson from SEC Country, SECCountry.com. He's the Auburn beat reporter, And here is our conversation with Justin that we recorded earlier today. And joining me now on the line, Justin Ferguson, the Auburn beat reporter for SEC Country, SECCountry.com, here to talk a little Auburn Tigers with us here as we get ready for the 2017 Chick-Fil-A Peach Bowl. Justin, how are you, man? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us late this evening. I know you just got off the road. You're probably exhausted, but I appreciate your time this evening. And so let's talk a little football real quick because, hey, all of a sudden, here's this game between these two squads, undefeated UCF and Auburn, who came within a whisker of getting into the college football playoff. What is the feeling over down on the plains right now with regard to Auburn and the college football playoff and how even though the loss in the SEC championship game, Alabama gets in over you guys, is there anger? Is there bewilderment? What's going on down there?
I think with the fans, it's a mixture right now. There's a little bit of frustration, definitely, especially when you see a team like Alabama get in, knowing that Auburn beat them by double digits at home, and to see Alabama get in over that, Auburn fans just kind of frustrated that they weren't able to take care of business in a couple of key games. However, the overall outlook of the program is going really well right now. You see a lot of people looking at this team with a lot of potential. There's some key NFL draft decisions to be made coming up with guys like Kerryon Johnson, Jarrett Stidham, Jeff Holland, Carlton Davis. But if Auburn can get a majority of those guys back, they'll return a majority of their starters from this team that won the SEC West. And they feel like just with this staff in place and what the roster they've got and what they're coming in and what could be another top 10 recruiting class, this is a team that's built to contend. So there are fans that are frustrated, but the overall kind of feeling around here is that Auburn's in a really good position right now. If they can go back to Atlanta, a place they'll become very familiar with in the next few months, and beat a very good UCF team, the last undefeated team in college football, one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in the country, consistency-wise. That's a lot of momentum for the 2018 season, what could be a big season. So while there is frustration, I think there's a lot of reason for fans to be optimistic, and they're looking at this game as kind of a springboard for next season.
Well, Auburn comes into the game a 9.5-point favorite, and actually that went up from the opening line, according to oddshark.com, was 8. Depending on where you look, you'll see 9.5, you'll see 10. Let me ask you about Auburn on offense right now. How does Gus Malzahn, think, or how do you think Gus Malzahn might try and attack UCF's defense, especially when you consider how many points the Knights have given up in the last two games against USF and Memphis?
I think one of the key things Auburn's going to try to do, especially in this game, is stay balanced. It's been kind of the big hallmark of this offense this season for so long. Auburn was the really big rushing team. You think back to 2013 when they went to the national championship, running the ball. Hadn't really had a consistent passing presence. Well, new offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey and quarterback Jarrett Stidham, they've kind of changed that. And so they're going to look at this UCF team that can score with anybody, but have had some hard time, not getting into shootouts. And I think Auburn's going to look to try to take advantage what I think we'll do up front, be able to kind of create some space in the trenches for the running game, and then try to hit UCF over the top of some of those big plays that you saw the Knights give up. And I thinking back to the USF game and the Memphis game down the stretch, great games, but UCF's been a little prone to those big plays, and Auburn can hit those big plays downfield once they've established the running game.
On the other side of the ball on defense, what a challenge that you guys have going up against the number one scoring team in the country. But this is, an SEC defense, and, we know how fast and physical SEC defenses are. How big of a challenge is this for Auburn's defense?
This is a really interesting challenge for Auburn because if you look at the teams they played this year, Auburn's been real dominant on defense outside of the SEC championship game where they just kind of ran out of gas in the fourth quarter. They haven't really played an offense quite like UCF. This was a down year for offense across the SEC. They played a Clemson team early in the season that was still trying to figure things out with Kelly Bryant, and he was hurt at points. So when it comes to a dynamic spread offense, that has been really consistently good. They haven't really had to face that this year. Now, they've been able to play great defense against pretty much anyone, but I wonder how much of that is a product of the SEC kind of being down. You saw teams like Ole Miss and Mississippi State just not able to produce against this defense. I think Auburn's going to make a big effort on taking advantage of their front four. It's throwing a heavy amount of rotation on the defensive line, try to wear down UCF. UCF's going to get their yards and get their points. They're going to try to tire those guys out up front and see if they can, get some shots in on guys like Mackenzie Milton. But, it's going to be a really fascinating matchup because in terms of a wide-open spread offense, Auburn really hasn't faced one that has been nearly as consistent as this UCF one has been.
Yeah, they're expecting quite a bit of points. The over/under 66.5. Now, we know how good Auburn is, especially on offense. Like we talked about, how Kerryon Johnson has just been a force for Auburn. Although Cameron Petway is another next to him in the backfield has been downgraded to out. But I wanted to ask about on defense with the Tigers. If you're a UCF fan and you're watching this game on New Year's Day in the I almost said the Georgia Dome in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It still sounds weird saying it.
Yep.
Who is the guy on defense for Auburn that if you're a UCF fan, you're watching like, okay, if we do not hear this guy's name much, we're going to have a good day?
That's a great question, and I would say it's Jeff Holland, one of the best pass rushers in college football this season. Jeff Holland stepped in for Carl Lawson, who is producing really well in the NFL right now, but has been able to improve on those numbers. And Holland has just been a consistent force. You think back to the times Auburn's defense has had their best success. It's when Jeff Holland's had a really good game. And even when he's not sacking the quarterback, it's just a matter of getting a bunch of pressure on him. He's got a great motor, really good burst. He's really worked on his, hand-to-hand kind of combat. He prides himself on that and getting free from blocks that way. If UCF can contain him, and I know UCF will be down there starting left tackle in this game from what I've seen down in Orlando.
Right.
Auburn's going to try to attack with Jeff Holland there. He's been their best passer, one of their best pass rushers in a long time. If UCF can limit his effectiveness, even with that banged-up offensive line over on the edges, I think it would be a good day for UCF because Jeff Holland held pretty quiet in the SEC championship game. He says he's probably going to be coming back next year for Auburn, so this is a game for him to kind of get some of that momentum, like I was saying earlier, on a personal level for the 2018 season because he has really been a force when Auburn's rolling on defense.
Right, that's Aaron Evans, UCF's senior left tackle, who was just announced this week. He's going to be out for the game, so his UCF career is over. That's a real bummer on the UCF side of the ball. Let's talk about Auburn in general. Right now, coming in this game 10-3, there's kind of this, I don't know if I believe this, but there's this trope that comes in that says, you have these SEC teams, and usually, of course, this applies to Alabama in the Nick Saban era, but this is applied to other SEC teams as well. Now, when they get left out of the big dance and they go to a bowl game and they face a team like UCF or, several years ago it was, Alabama facing Utah and Kyle Whittingham, that these SEC teams don't get up to play these games. Now, I don't necessarily buy that, but is there concern at Auburn, either inside the building or outside the building, that might be the case this time around?
Outside of the building, when you hear fans, they're just kind of like, how motivated can you be for this game? They didn't get in the playoff. It's very disappointing. And I think a lot of fans, Auburn fans, aren't recognizing just kind of the challenge that UCF's going to bring. This is a fantastic team, but Auburn fans will still look at it as a lose-lose situation. If they beat UCF, okay, they beat a Group of 5 team, big deal. And if they lose, it's the end of the world. So sour way to end the season. Inside the building, though, they don't see that at all. They see it, like I said, as a goal. They need to win this game. Auburn, under Gus Malzahn, just hasn't had a lot of postseason success, in bowl games. The only win they've had has come against Memphis in the Birmingham Bowl a couple of years back. So they really need kind of a signature bowl win. And Gus Malzahn this week talked about what this means for Auburn. If they get this win, this will be win number 11 on the season. Only 6 other Auburn teams have ever done that, and they're making that their main goal. Get win number 11, go down as one of the best teams in school history, despite, not winning the SEC and not going to the playoff. It's still a really good year. And like I said, if they can come back next year with the guys they have reloaded, they'll be fine. They'll be a contender once again. So this is inside the building. People are very much taking it seriously because this is such an important game to kind of set the tone for the next year and wrap up what has been a really, really impressive season for Auburn, even with those disappointing losses.
Well, it has indeed, and these are two teams coming off of very, very impressive seasons, and especially the way they have both finished out. So this will be one heck of a challenge for UCF, who is looking for their first win against Auburn in what will be their fourth try. The Knights lost 3 consecutive games at Jordan-Hare back in the late 90s, including a game that I actually profiled on our site, blackandgoldbanneret.com, a 10-6 game that was decided in the final moments. Do you remember that game? It was 1998 back then.
I barely remember that game. I would have been pretty young then, but that was one of those times where Auburn in those late 90s, they kind of had some scares against teams that were kind of on the rise. I remember a Southern Miss game where they really took Auburn. Wyoming took them down to the wire around that era too. So it's really been, just from a college football fan standpoint, it's really been kind of incredible to see just the rise of UCF over the years, and even at the very, very low point they were in right before Scott Frost came in, and now to see Frost getting one more game. It's just a really cool story, and a really cool story for this team and this program, which is, just personally, it has been kind of fun to watch their rise.
Well, it should be one heck of a football game. At least I know we both hope it does. It will be on New Year's Day at 12:30 p.m. at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Justin Ferguson from SECCountry.com. Justin, how can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, the easiest way to get up with me is on Twitter. I'm at JFergusonAU on Twitter. And if you want to read our stuff, our coverage for Auburn heading into the Peach Bowl, if you want a little perspective from the Auburn side, go to SECCountry.com/Auburn. The easiest way to keep up with us, 100% free coverage of Auburn. And, that's the easiest way to get up with us, and looking forward to maybe interacting a little bit with some UCF fans heading into this game. It should be a fun one.
Sounds good, Justin. We'll catch you in Atlanta. Until then, be safe, and we'll see you on New Year's Day.
Hey, thanks, guys.
All right, cool. And thanks to Justin for helping us out. And again, SECCountry.com, Jay Ferguson AU on Twitter. We'll be following him very closely as we head down towards game day and on game day as well. Real quick, Eric Lopez. I know I mentioned this to Justin, and I'll go back to you. UCF's all-time series against Auburn, 0-3.
Yeah.
3 consecutive losses in 97, 98, and 99. And I got a piece up on Black and Gold Banneret right now about that 98 game, which somebody posted it on YouTube, and I put myself through it. And it is. Let me tell you, if you're a UCF fan, and you UCF fans who are around in 98, or maybe graduated, maybe were at school at that time, that went through that game. That's the true UCF fan. To understand what it was like to deal with that level of heartbreak when you come so close against a big-time team that is just ripe for the picking, and you come up short, 10-6 in that game. The Dante Culpepper fumble, they had a 4th and 10, and Auburn converts the 4th and 10 with less than a minute to go to stay alive. They still have the whole length of the field to go, and then they hit Karsten Bailey for that long touchdown that gives Auburn the lead. UCF turned the ball over 5 times. They had 5 trips into the red zone and could only come up with 2 field goals out of that. I mean, it was just it was one of those days where you're like, man, this team maybe will never get over the hump. And to see where we are basically 20 years later, playing Auburn again, but this time in the Sugar Bowl, in the Peach Bowl, Wow, what a long way, what a long, strange trip it's been. What a journey it's been for this program when you think about it from a historical perspective. Do you remember that game in '98?
I do. Well, the funny story about that, that year was the first time the year that I went to my first ever UCF game.
Right.
I had a friend of mine.
Culpepper's senior year.
Correct. And this is kind of the impact of what, things. I was a senior high school in Miami Killian, all right, at the time. And I had a friend who I went to high school with, who went to UCF. I think it was his freshman or sophomore year. I don't remember the year. So I went up to visit him, and we went on the weekend of Halloween because it was Halloween Horror Nights. They did all the Halloween like they do now. And he came up to, hey, you should go see this Culpepper kid. Because there was a lot of hype on Culpepper. The year before, they had given Nebraska the scare with Scott Frost at quarterback that we've talked about in previous podcasts.
Right.
So I wanted to see Culpepper because he was going to be a high draft pick. And he was. He generally was the best quarterback in the state by far that year of anybody. Better than what Florida had, better than what Florida State had, Miami, etc. So I went up to Halloween that weekend. They were playing Youngstown State, who was coached by Jim Tressel. And Culpepper was fantastic. I went to the Citrus Bowl. There was about 20,000. I remember everybody was doing the keys at kickoff and things like that. And that was a big year because the expectation was, in talking to people, was about trying to UCF getting to a first time ever to go to a bowl game. And at the time, back then it was harder to get to bowl games. UCF was an independent. They had no alignment. So it was kind of a crapshoot. And I remember that when I was talking to people after the Youngstown State game, I'm like, everybody said it's going to come down to the Auburn game. They believed if they could beat Auburn, and Auburn was struggling that year, if they could beat Auburn, they felt they would be 10-1 because at the time they had already lost at Purdue, if you remember, with Drew Brees up in Purdue.
Right.
So the thought was, if we beat Auburn, we're going to go to a bowl game. And so I remember following that from that point on because I was intrigued. And I remember, and it was weird. Talk about how things have changed. Back then, UCF, and you know this, UCF had certain games televised on Sun Sports, or what it used to be called
Sunshine Network. Yeah,
and they weren't necessarily live. Sometimes they were on delay,
right?
Which is crazy to think about now.
I remember that Louisiana Tech game was televised on delay. That year.
With Tim Rattay.
Right.
And I remember the broadcast crew, and I remember watching it when you popped up their story there, was Andrew Bonico.
Who now works with the San Antonio Spurs.
I've booked him on local radio. He's the TV host for the San Antonio Spurs for over a couple of decades. And Charles Davis, who's obviously now a national football analyst for Fox. And so I remember watching that game, and I'm like, oh, my God, they lost that game the way they did.
Yeah.
And UCF finished up 9-2. They beat New Mexico, who had a young kid by the name of Brian Urlacher playing in the secondary. All right. And I remember, I guess UCF they thought it came down to the UCLA-Miami game. Had UCLA beaten Miami, there was a spot that UCF was going to go to the Hawaii Bowl, I think it was, or something like that.
Which, by the way, was played during that conference championship weekend because there was a hurricane that rolled. I think it was Hurricane George rolled through South Florida and moved the game.
Yes. And so that game impacted the national championship because it helped Florida State get in, but it hurt UCF because Miami beat UCLA. UCLA was bumped. They didn't make the playoffs. They got bumped to the Rose Bowl, and then Arizona was bumped from the Rose Bowl to another. And so there was a kind of a rippling effect. And so as a result, the slot that UCF possibly was going to get into was not available, and unfortunately, despite going 9-2, UCF did not go to a bowl game. So I remember that game.
Auburn, they probably would have gotten into that bowl game.
That was what people were telling me when I was up there at that UCF game. So from that point on, I started following UCF football. That was the turning point for me. So yes, that was the first experience of disappointment. I wasn't as devastated, obviously, because at the time I had gone to school at UCF. But, I mean, I remember that game very well, and unfortunately, it cost, I think, UCF a bowl game. So, unfortunately, I remember it too well.
Yeah, hard for an independent to get to a bowl game unless you're Notre Dame back then. But But yeah, so I got to write up on that game.
Back then they didn't have 41 bowl games either. So
that's true too. I got to write up on that game on blackandgoldbanneret.com that you can check out. And like I said at the end, never forget. Never forget. So again,
have I shown you my Culpepper jersey? I bought a Dante Culpepper number 8 UCF jersey that year when I went to the bookstore.
It's not gold, it's yellow, isn't it?
No, it's the black jersey. It's a black number 8 with a gold number. Back what they used to with Mike Kruzek as the head coach.
Yeah,
it was fun.
We've got we've got that up there on blackandgoldbanneret.com. We'll have a few other things that we're working on. I'm working on a table of TV ratings of UCF nationally televised games as well. We got a bunch of stuff that's coming for you.
Yeah, real quick.
Few weeks. Yeah, go ahead.
We had some listeners tweet at us. At Black and Gold Banneret. They tweeted at me at Eric Lopez-Elo. I know they tweeted you too, I believe, about this.
We've been seeing a lot more traffic on Twitter the last month or so, which
absolutely.
I like to see. And thanks to everyone for reaching out.
Absolutely. And one of the questions that the listeners, people were tuning in, asked was, do they believe that this Peach Bowl will be a higher rated game than the Fiesta Bowl as far as for UCF's concerned?
I think that's very hard because of the time slot. It's 12:30 noon on New Year's Day.
It's right. And the answer I gave him on Twitter, and I'll answer it here, the Baylor game drew about 11 million viewers nationally. But that was a primetime game on New Year's Day night.
Right.
There was no other football game going head-to-head at that time. So, A, more people are home usually at night than they are at 12:30. And B, that was the only football game. Whereas for this scenario, UCF's going up against not only 2 football games, but I think 2 very attractive football games. Notre Dame and LSU, which will be played in Orlando. It's going to be on ABC. And then
that's
Michigan.
The Citrus Bowl.
Yep, and then Michigan and South Carolina is playing at the Outback Bowl on ESPN2. You got big brands like Michigan and Notre Dame involved, as well as LSU. That's going to take away national viewers. I would not be surprised, actually, if UCF and Auburn is of those 3 games is the third viewed game. I would not be surprised if I definitely expect Notre Dame and LSU to beat it head to head, and I would not be shocked if Michigan and South Carolina beat UCF Auburn. It'll be close, but I don't think they'll do national. From a local standpoint, the Baylor game did a 17.4 rating. I don't know if UCF Auburn locally will do that number, but I do think it'll do a big number, but I don't think it'll reach that number of a 17. We'll see. We'll monitor that for you, obviously. But just to answer it, no. I think if I had to project, I think UCF Auburn will probably draw about 5 million viewers. The one thing it does have going for them, they're the leading game until the first semifinal game, which is Georgia and Oklahoma, which will be on ESPN. So if UCF and Auburn plays a really good game, if it's a good game in the fourth quarter, you're going to get a lot of viewers tuning in the fourth quarter because they're going to be getting ready to watch the playoff game and they're going to watch the end of the UCF Auburn game if it's close. So they do have that in their favor.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing that we're going to be keeping an eye on is the TV numbers as they come through. And again, we're going to have Brian Murphy is going to be up in Atlanta. I'll be up in Atlanta providing some of the fan perspective throughout New Year's throughout New Year's Day, New Year's morning, and during the game. And of course, Derek Warden will be up there taking care of the visuals as well with his photo gallery of the game too. So, real quick before we go, wanted to hit up basketball real quick. Ladies first. Women's basketball is on a 2-game winning streak. They knocked off Georgia Southern, blew out Georgia Southern at home, 62-38 last Sunday, and then followed that up by going up to Boston University to play the Terriers up in Boston and beat them 47-32. Now they got a long road trip out west this week. The Knights and Coach Abe are playing 2 California teams. They're playing UC Davis at Davis, California, and then they're playing Pacific in Stockton, California. So that's going to be a long road trip out there. By the way, in that BU game, Zakiya Saunders has been a real revelation. 20 points for UCF in that game to go with 9 rebounds. Aaliyah Gregory did not have a very good shooting game, only 2 of 12, but Zakiya really picked her up in that win for UCF at BU. So keep an eye out on UCF women's basketball there. Coach Abe and her team, they are 6-4 right now, 3-2 at home, 3-2 away. Their next home game after the California road trip will be December 28th against Davidson. That will be that's a Thursday at 2 p.m. Thursday 2 p.m. UCF against Davidson at CFE Arena. Now the men's team, real quick, Eric Lopez. So far, they seem to be weathering that injury storm that they've suffered early in the year. Coming up, right now they've won 3 in a row. They beat, of course, number 24 Alabama up in Tuscaloosa, 65-62. That was back on December the 3rd, a Sunday. But this past week, they knock off Southern 76-60 at home, and then Southeastern Louisiana 61 to 53. For the Knights so far this year, by the way, in that last game against Southeastern Louisiana, let's see, where's the box? There it is. For UCF, Taco Fall, 19 points, 11 boards, 8 of 10 from the field, not bad. A.J. Davis got into the act with 13 points and 7 rebounds. He used 6 of 10 from the field. Terrell Allen was in double figures with 12 points. So they seem to be sort of weathering the B.J. Taylor-less storm so far. Taco is leading the team in scoring as of right now, 12.3 a game. A.J. Davis right behind him at 10.6. Cesar DeJesus at 9 point. He's at 9.9 points a game. So they're getting some good contributions from some of these guys. While Taco came back from that hip problem, and while they await B.J. Taylor to come back, so not a bad start for Johnny Dawkins and his team at 7-3, don't you think?
Not bad, but they need B.J. Taylor back. I mean, offensively, it's a work in progress. It's a challenge. I watched the Louisiana game.
The 3 games they lost were all in a row. That was the West Virginia, the St. John's.
Well, St. John's was at Disney. I was there for the St. John's game. That was a game at Disney. It was a noon tip. I was disappointed in the fan base. They didn't really show up for that game. Like, literally, they didn't show up for that game. And I thought that hurt the team because I think the team really thrives on the emotions and the energy that the fans can give them. And I thought that hurt them there. And it's tough this time of year. I mean, a lot of students are away and things like that.
That was over Thanksgiving weekend.
Right. The Louisiana game, obviously, that was a close game. And UCF certainly offensively has struggles shooting the ball. It's been inconsistent. They need a playmaker like BJ. They're winning right now with defense. And they got to go to Stetson, and they got South Carolina State at home before they start conference. You got to win those 2 games. The big thing you got to do is avoid having a bad loss on your resume prior to conference. And if UCF can win the next 2 games, I think they would have accomplished that. And you hope that BJ's back by the start of the conference play, because I can tell you this conference is loaded. Joe Lunardi, I know it's December and it's early, but he's projecting already.
Early for Joe Lunardi.
He's got 4 teams in from the league to make the NCAAs. Obviously, Wichita State, which he has as a number 1 overall seed. He's got Cincinnati in, and he's got SMU and Temple in. So what it tells you is this is a stacked league, and I think UCF, if they want to make it to the NCAA tournament, they're going to have to beat the SMUs and the Cincinnatis. And to do that, they're going to need to be as close to full strength as they can, and that includes B.J. Taylor, because my concern is, will this team have enough offense come conference play?
Yeah.
That's my big question mark for this team as we get closer to conference.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. We got our old friends from Stetson that we're heading up to the Edmonds Center to go face on Tuesday, December the 19th coming up. You going to that game, by the way?
I think I will. We'll see. Game time decision. Got to make sure some things go well, but I might try to pull that off. I went there a couple years ago. It's a fun deal. You've been there.
Yep.
It's a nice arena. A lot of UCF fans I know will make that trip, so it should be a fun one.
It's a fun road trip. I'm not going to lie. It's an interesting environment, to say the least. And then that home game, like you said, against South Carolina State, December 21st. That's a Thursday at 7 p.m. If you can make the road trip up to DeLand, make sure you do it. 6 p.m. tip for that game, December 19th, as well. And then conference play starts with UCF traveling to Dallas to face SMU on Wednesday, December 27th. So you're right. They can get out of those 2. You get out of those 2 games, then you're 9-3 heading into conference play with your only losses against a Big East team, a Big 12 team, and a Big 10 team, or excuse me, a SEC team. So
SEC, right?
So overall, not too bad if you can get through it.
And the big thing is they got to win at Alabama. That's a big win. That's your resume. You got to build a resume, and that's a good start on the road at Alabama, a team that's been in the top 25, probably make the NCAA tournament from the SEC. That's a big win to start. They got that accomplished, so that was a positive. So that's why I'm saying if they can win these next 2 games, I actually think all things considered, with the injuries this team has had, this would have been a successful pre-conference if they can win the next 2 games, considering the injury to B.J. Taylor. You obviously lose Aubrey Dawkins before the year. You got a lot of young guys on this roster. It would be a success if they can win these next 2 games getting ready in the conference.
Right. And especially you consider that the 2 of the 3 games that they lost were by a combined 6 points. Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing, too, that you had to look at. So, all right. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as UCF men's basketball progresses with those last 2 games in the non-conference schedule, heading through to the end of heading through into conference play. So, as we wrap up here on this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, Eric Lopez, what are you up to this week?
I'm just going to relax. I'm just going to talk to some friends and see if I could flip them. Just flip them to root for different teams, and on my spare time, and maybe flip them from root for UCF if they're rooting for somebody else. Just do some recruiting maybe for the game. But otherwise, no, I'm just laying low, getting ready for the holidays. It's weird. It's actually weird because it's the first weekend I can remember where I don't have to go anywhere. There's no sporting event to go to.
Well, you got the softball stuff you've been working on, though, right?
Well, I am working on that on fastpitchnews.com. A lot of stuff considering we get ready for the 2018 season, which is, believe it or not,
right around
2 months.
The corner.
Oh yeah, so I've been working on that. But as far as going to a game, there's no UCF games to go to this weekend. It's weird.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, but we'll have a couple of things coming down the stretch here, like right around Christmas that we'll be going to. And before you know it, it'll be college bowl season. So keep an eye on blackandgoldbanneret.com as myself and Eric and Brian Murphy will be dropping some content here on you, some knowledge here and there as we head up towards the bowl game in Atlanta on New Year's Day. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. On Facebook, we are at facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. And on Twitter, we are at UCF_Banneret. You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon, and you can follow Eric at
Eric Lopez Elo. And always bring out questions. Send questions in. We'll answer them.
We love it when people send in questions. We had a little bit of talk. I was actually going back and forth with a couple fans and Philip and your buddy Philip Rossman Reich about the ESPN Fox 21st Century Fox deal and all the ESPN regionals and stuff. So that should be pretty.
By the way,
send
off Mike Francesa. It's done. Depending on
it's over.
Friday.
The Pope. Goodness me, I can't believe, man. Stuff's been changing. It's the only thing constant in life is change, man. Unbelievable. So,
by the way, Nightline, we haven't forgotten. We won our matchup. We expect our dinner, and I'm guessing that'll be after the bowl game. But.
Listen, and not Steak and Shake, Fegley. Okay, we're expecting real steaks.
That's right, Trace. Let's go.
Yeah. All right. So, oh, by the way, make sure you follow Spokes_Murphy. That's our boy Brian Murphy on Twitter as well. Who's been all over UCF football and will be all over UCF basketball.
By the way, congratulations, Jeff. Congratulations on your Yankees stealing Giancarlo Stanton for like a nickel.
Stealing?
Just taking him for a nickel.
Derek Jeter just gave him to us.
Yeah, that's great. Just destroy South Florida baseball. And Derek Jeter just as a secret agent helping the Yankees out again. Great, congrats,
and
Murph.
You guys are in the Marlins are in a full teardown right now. It's time to change. It's time to change the culture. Time to change the culture.
That's what we do. That's what they do down there. And they wonder why nobody goes to games.
You can follow us as well. With this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Like you said, keep an eye on us throughout the month of December here, where you can follow Eric Lopez as he complains about the Marlins and me and Brian as we get ready for the bowl game in January. So, for Eric Lopez, one more thank you once again to our friend Sam Unger as well. Thanks again, Sam, for sponsoring the podcast, our first and so far only sponsor. We appreciate you, bud. And make sure you follow samsellsorlando.net as well for all your real estate needs here in Central Florida. So, for Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you again next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.